Hey, it's Amelie Grace here. It's been a while since I've tuned in and connected with y'all around the gene keys and astrology. And right now I'm just feeling that surge of energy come up in this moment. And of course, I gotta seize it. So I'm sitting outside on our property. It's a beautiful fall day here in Portland. And I want to talk to everyone about the upcoming full moon. And before I get into it, I just want to bring our awareness to the new moon that happened on September 9th, 9/9, that was in the 64th gene key. And so I just love looking at how the seeds of cycles within certain gene keys, it was a Virgo sign. So inside of that terrain of Virgo, that mutable earth that wants to come to fully participate in the fullness of life and in the sensual somatic experience of being a part of reality and all that goes into that, the healing, the devotion, the how can we perfect ourselves. So right now we're inside of a cycle of how can we become better and refine ourselves. We find ourselves with a full moon that's in Aries and with the sun in Libra in that opposition that calls us into relationships. So before I get right into there, I do want to just say that 64 moving from the shadow of confusion to the gift of imagination and the city of, in what are we talking about here? Is it imagination? Oh, right. Illumination. This is like the sort of cloud of confusion that comes in and we don't really know, something wants to be transformed here. It's in the ring of alchemy, and moving from confusion to imagination is basically being able to wield suffering as a agent of fuel for our creative becoming. So definitely feeling into where this cycle in particular is asking us to meet somewhere that's of a base level, not fully formed yet, still in process, and maybe where we've been denying and pushing against actually going into the discomfort of that, and make contact with that area so that it can actually be brought into our offerings, be brought into art and the beauty of our own, becoming. So the work in this cycle feels like it's really pinpointed here at the full moon, which is so potent. So the full moon the moon itself is conjunct to Chiron, which is at 0 degrees Aries. So Chiron, the wounded healer, retrograding through the first degrees of Aries. And 0 degrees inside astrology is definitely a poignant place. It's like it's holding this fresh space for encountering that archetypal terrain in our lives in a new way. So what is the new sense of sovereignty, independence, and that freedom of being beings on this earth that's calling us to step into that? So Chiron is always bringing, though, the pain, what keeps us from being ourselves, unapologetically. And it feels like so much of that is about our codependence and the way that we're wrapped inside of the Libra shadow, which is where the sun conjunct to Mercury at that full moon is going to be sitting in those first degrees of Libra. So the shadow elements there is where do we lose ourselves inside of our relationships? And so adding on a dimension of the aspect here is that it's this full moon, this opposition is square to Saturn in the early degrees of Capricorn. So squares, they're eventful. They're saying work is at play. Saturn definitely means business, right? It's here to mature us and hands us our homework, hands us the things that we have to work on. And Capricorn, just noticing this is a cardinal T-square. So we're working with, this is action. This is when things happen in our lives. So like this T-square, this full moon T-square conjunct the early degrees of the cardinal signs is definitely like causing change in our lives. And the way I'm reading into this is that the change and the work that we're required right now to fulfill our evolutionary imperative for even incarnating on this planet to begin with, like there's a responsibility there, is to untether ourselves from the codependence inside of our relationships. So where are you taking yourself back from where you've been caught up with others? You know, it reminds me of the whole Leo Mercury retrograde this summer. That to me was so much about bringing our awareness to where our central column of intact esteem has been compromised and collapsed through our childhood wounding when the world said, you're not enough. And then we have these holes in our, you know, sense of self and value, worth, that start to like collapse in and start to suck energy. So that's where we get tied up and I need this from you. I need you to see me. And on a gift level, yo, we gotta totally own that we do need each other's reflections. There is a gift frequency, you know, way that we do get to be in relationship and healthy relationship. But fundamentally, we are establishing a very, like, I feel like it's this unshakable sense of self and value that just doesn't get to be at the whims of these emotional patterns that have taken our power, taken our capacity to really show up and meet our challenges and just be who we are. And it's just, the work is so real, you know, like we can conceptualize all this, but when it hits the road and we're faced with these difficulties in our relationships or with these opportunities to grow that seem more like a curse, why life? Why do you do this to me? It really gets real, and we get to see where we're at and, you know, just be honest with ourselves. One of the main things that's coming up for me these days is vulnerability as a strength. And that's something I've lived my life, you know, in accordance to for a long time, but it's becoming more and more real. If we can surround ourselves with people that really honor honor our vulnerabilities and say thank you for being honest with that painful place, then we get to feel safe inside of that. And our nervous system gets to realize that it's not gonna die because, you know, we're just actually all here. And as Richard talks about in the first gene key, you know, mistakes and the capacity to make mistakes is what creative genius is based on. So, yo, let's get with it. Let's be able to expose ourselves and say what's tough. There's one last thing that I want to, well, let's talk about the gene keys, the full moon. And by the way, this is September 24th, this upcoming Monday, at least on the Pacific coast of the United States. The full moon is going to be in the the 25th gene key, and the sun will be in the 46. And so where are we constricting the shadow of the 25 against this place that is really calling us to come in contact with the pain of our enmeshment inside of relations and such? Where can we actually accept and allow the difficulties to really move the energy? Because with the 46, from seriousness to delight, it really is just about moving the energy and being in contact with the suffering. And man, when that 25 of universal love opens up and that ecstasy of 46, there is so much love to go around. So there, you know, tap into those codes, go into those gene keys and read them, sit with them, saturate in the audios, you know, just fully give yourself the gift of that transmission, because it's definitely a core element to the whole code of life. Last thing I want to say here is that this full moon is making a really sweet contact with the nodes of the moon, which have just been super in our awareness and in the collective because of the Mars retrograde having its way with the South Node, the collective lunar node right now. This full moon is going to be sextile the nodes. And so they're creating these double trines and double sextiles, meaning there's I feel like it is like tied to our evolutionary imperative, so sort of like the direction that we're all being led on as a collective right now, to unhook from our past, untether from the compromised, conforming shadow of Aquarius, ways that we like tie up our individuality inside of the collective. And the way that Mars is there on the South Node, really helping us to like have energy around this, like, come on, let's really undo ourselves from social norms and break into the creative genius that we are, Leo North Node. That whole pathway and process that we've been in for the last year plus is in it's like we're receiving celestial instructions for that process through this new moon, or full moon, that's saying, come on, let's actually, part of how we do that is by getting into the nitty-gritty of our interpersonal relationships and finding those tender places where our individuality is being swallowed by our dependency on others. And just, what a tender place that is. So I think I want to just complete this little moment with you, just with that softness of acceptance. That is that 25th gene key being pulsed here in the field of, and where Chiron is and where the full moon will be. Wow, be gentle, allow yourself to feel discomfort. It's safe, and be exposing with it. Allow it to be seen. Accept it into your emotional reality, and eventually it will become the embrace of a love that is beyond what we can even imagine. So we are so much more and capable of so much more than we know. And as much as I may have been telling myself that, like for 10, 15, however many years, it's becoming real in a way that has like Saturn and Capricorn's like seal of approval, like, yo, let's make this real. And I'm feeling that in my life, just total like gear shift into gift activity. And so join me in the journey of vulnerability and allowing the deep pain to actually transmute before our eyes into the beauty that it is. So many blessings to you, and we'll tune in soon around the Venus retrograde coming up, because this is all a part of that. In fact, it's worth noting that this is all happening in the setup phase for Venus retrograde in Scorpio and Libra, which is dealing with everything that I've touched on so far. So it's all part of the puzzle. Deep breaths, lots of love.